The stories you're about to see are real. The rewards up to $5 million are real. This is Augusta Crime Stoppers, where you stay anonymous. The criminals don't.
Grovetown Department of Public Safety's new chief, Gary Jones, says he needs your help catching a suspect who has slashed the tires on multiple cars in Pepper Hill. Chief Gary Jones says someone went to the Pepper Hill subdivision in Grovetown on January 14th and slashed the tires on 22 cars. Jones says the incidents happened sometime between 7:30 p.m. and 8 p.m. Jones says the suspect is driving a newer model red Kia Soul. He goes on to say, "We were not able to obtain a tag number of the suspect vehicle for the 20 criminal trespass incidents in Pepper Hill. The vehicle in this photo is believed to be a newer model Kia Soul, possibly red or orange in color. The quality is not great, but that's all we have at this point. A reward of $1,000 is being offered for anyone with information about the incidents. If you have any information, please call Grovetown Department of Public Safety at 706-863-1212. Crime Stoppers at 800-222-TIPS. Or text your tips to 803-441-8744, where you remain anonymous and get paid." The Richmond County Sheriff's Office is looking for someone who robbed the Paul's IGA on Green Street on Friday. According to records, deputies say a man with a ski mask over his face walked into the Paul's IGA with a semi-automatic handgun and told the cashier, "You know what time it is." The robber got away with about $4,000. If you know anything, who or where this armed robber may be, please call the Richmond County Sheriff's Office. Crime Stoppers at 800-222-TIPS. Or text your tips to tips at AugustaCrimeStoppers.org, where you remain anonymous and get paid. Richmond County Sheriff's deputies are still looking for who killed 64-year-old Todd Ballard on Gordon Highway last week. Todd Ballard was riding his bike on Gordon Highway when he was hit and killed by a hit-and-run driver last Friday. Jeff Ballard, Todd Ballard's brother, wants to find out who left his brother fighting for his life on the road. If you think you know who hit and run Todd Ballard on Gordon Highway last Friday, please call the Richmond County Sheriff's Office. Crime Stoppers at 800-222-TIPS. Or text your tips to 803-441-8744, where you remain anonymous and get paid.
And now, this Crime Stoppers special report.
The Columbia County Sheriff's Office has 2 new eyes in the sky they're going to be using to take photographs of accidents from way up high, photograph and film fleeing and evading felons, look for missing people, and try to make use of a new technology that a whole bunch of people are already using. Quadcopters have a camera that allows them to fly around even near your bedroom window and send high-resolution video to whoever. A lot of people are worried about this new technology. Go to our Augusta Crime Stoppers Facebook page and let us know what you think. Richmond County Sheriff's deputies are seeking a black male who spoke with a Caribbean accent and wore a dark hoodie as he robbed the La Quinta Inn on Washington Road early Tuesday. If you know who or where this strong Caribbean accented hooded robber may be, please call the police. Crime Stoppers at 800-222-TIPS. Or text your tips to 803-441-8744, where you remain anonymous and get paid. The Richmond County Sheriff's deputies are still looking to speak with Shane Champagne. If you know where or how they may speak with Shane Champagne, please call the Richmond County Sheriff's Office. Crime Stoppers at 800-222-TIPS, or text your tips to tips@AugustaCrimeStoppers.org, where you remain anonymous and get paid.
And now, this Crime Stoppers special report.
The Richmond County Sheriff's Office has released their crime stats going from 2012 to 2014. A lot of areas of crime have improved. Unfortunately, residential robbery or home invasions are up and may get much higher. Aggravated assault without a gun, i.e. axe, hatchet, chainsaw, drill, nail gun, acid, broken glass, poison, clubs, etc., are up too. Gee, it almost makes you prefer to be shot. Thanks to your tips coming in, some crime has gone down. But there are some concerns, and if you guys don't keep calling them in to 800-222-TIPS, these numbers could turn around in no time flat. If you can't or won't call the police, and if you don't want to call 800-222-TIPS, you can text us at 803-441-8744, where you remain anonymous and get paid.
Roy Roger Blount Jr. is wanted by the Bibb County Sheriff's Office for state court violation of probation. If you have any information, call the Bibb County Sheriff's Office at 478-742-2330. The Crime Stoppers International tip line at 1-800-222-TIPS, or text your tips to 803-441-8744, where you remain anonymous and get paid. And now, this Crime Stoppers special report.
PoliceOne.com released a new video this week showing a tense traffic stop last month in which a man stepping out of a car with his hands raised at shoulder height was fatally shot by police. A few weeks back, we had a special segment on why you should not leave your insurance and registration in your glove compartment. Apparently, whenever this car was pulled over, the driver opened his glove compartment to get his insurance and registration, and he had a handgun in that glove compartment. When the police officer saw the handgun in the glove compartment, he told the passenger not to get out of the car. The passenger ignored the police officer's orders, and because the driver did not put his driver's license and registration above the visor where we suggested, but instead opened his glove compartment, which revealed a handgun, his buddy got killed when he got out of his car. Because traffic stops are where most police officers are injured, you should always leave your registration and insurance card above your visor in some type of special holder. So if you get pulled over, instead of reaching into your glove compartment, which would make anyone nervous, all you're doing is reaching above your visor, getting your license, registration, insurance, and showing it to the police officer. All of this could have been avoided if the driver had been prepared and done that simple thing.
And now, this Crime Stoppers special report.
What if I told you that every keystroke, every password, everything on your computer is butt naked in cyberspace? What if I told you that even if you're the biggest TV station or newspaper in the region, that every single secret you have is being looked at and in most cases laughed at by someone who you may not know? How did this happen, you ask? Go to our Augusta Facebook page, search for AugustaCrimeStoppers.org, and find out.
So recently we heard a little bit about some of the low-end corporate spying that's often billed as being sort of like the hottest, most important stuff. So the Finfisher, the hacking team, the VuPen, and sort of in that order it becomes more sophisticated and more tied in with the National Security Agency. There are some Freedom of Information Act requests that have gone out that actually show VuPen being an NSA contractor writing exploits, that there are some ties there. This sort of covers the sort of the whole gamut, I believe, which is that you can buy these like little pieces of forensics hardware, and just as a sort of fun thing, I bought some of those, and then I looked at how they worked, and I noticed that this mouse jiggler, you plug it in, and the idea is that it like keeps your screen awake. So have any of you seen that at all? It's this piece of forensics hardware so your screensaver doesn't activate. So I showed it to one of the systemd developers, and now when you plug those into a Linux box that runs systemd, they automatically lock the screen when it sees the USB ID. So when people talk about free software, free as in freedom, that's part of what they're talking about. But I want to talk a little bit about how it's not necessarily the case that because they're not the most fantastic, they're not the most sophisticated, that therefore we shouldn't worry about it. This is Rafal. I met him when I was in Oslo, in Norway, for the Oslo Freedom Forum. And basically, he asked me to look at his computer because he said, something seems to be wrong with it. I think that there's something, slowing it down. And I said, well, I'm not going to find anything. I don't have any tools. We're just going to sit at the computer. And I looked, and it has to be the lamest backdoor I've ever found. It was basically a very small program that would just run in a loop and take screenshots. And it failed to upload some of the screenshots, and so there were 8 gigabytes of screenshots in his home directory. And I said, I'm sorry to break it to you, but I think that you've been owned. And by complete idiots. And he was really he felt really violated. And then he told me what he does, which is he's an investigative journalist who works with top secret documents all the time with extreme operational security to protect his sources. But when it came to computing, JSchool failed him. And as a result, he was compromised pretty badly. He was not using a specialized operating system like Tails, which if you're a journalist and you're not using Tails, you should probably be using Tails unless you really know what you're doing. Apple did a pretty good job at revoking this application, and it was, in theory it stopped. There are lots of samples from the same group, and this group that did this is tied to a whole bunch of other attacks across the world, actually, which is why it's connected up there with Operation Hangover. The scary thing, though, is that this summer, after we'd met, he was actually arrested relating to some of these things. And now, as I understand it, he's out, but when you mess with a military dictatorship, it messes with you back. So even though that's one of the lamest backdoors, his life is under threat. So just simple things can cause serious harm to regular people that are working for some kind of truth-telling. And that to me is really a big part of my motivation for coming here to talk about what I'm going to talk about next, which is that for every person that we learn about like Rafal, I think there are lots of people we will never learn about. And to me, that's very scary. And I think we need to bring some transparency, and that's what we're going to talk about now. And I really want to emphasize this point. Even though they're not technically impressive, they are actually still harmful. And that is really a key point to drive home. I mean, some of the backdoors that I've seen are really not sophisticated. They're not really that interesting. And in some cases, they're common off-the-shelf purchases between businesses. So it's like business-to-business exploitation, software development. I feel like that's really kind of sad, and I also think we can change this. We can turn this around by exposing it. So, what's it all about, though? Fundamentally, it's about control, baby. And that is what we're going to get into. It's not just about control of machines. What happened with Rafal is about control of people. And fundamentally, when we talk about things like internet freedom, and we talk about tactical surveillance and strategic surveillance, we're talking about control of people through the machinery that they use. And this is a really, I think a really kind of, I'm trying to make you laugh a little bit because what I'm going to show you today is wrist-slitting depressing. So, part 2, or act 2 of part 2. Basically, the NSA, they want to be able to spy on you, and if they have 10 different options for spying on you that you know about, they have 13 ways of doing it, and they do all 13. So that's a pretty scary thing. And basically their goal is to have total surveillance of everything that they are interested in. So there really is no boundary to what they want to do. There is only sometimes a boundary of what they are funded to be able to do, and the amount of things they're able to do at scale. They seem to just do those things without thinking too much about it, and there are specific tactical things where they have to target a group or an individual, and those things seem limited either by budget or simply by their time. And as we have released today on Der Spiegel's website, which it should be live, I just checked, it should be live for everyone here, we actually show a whole bunch of details about their budgets as well as the individuals involved with the NSA and the Tailored Access Operations Group in terms of numbers. So it should give you a rough idea showing that there was a small period of time in which the internet was really free and we did not have people from the US military that were watching over it and exploiting everyone on it. And now we see every year that the number of people who are hired to break into people's computers as part of grand operations, those people are growing day by day, actually. And every year there are more and more people that are allocated, and we see this growth. So that's the goal, non-attribution and total surveillance. And they want to do it completely in the dark. The good news is that they can't. So now I'm going to show you a bit about it. First, before I show you any pictures, I want to sort of give you the big picture from the top down. So there is a planetary strategic surveillance system, and there are many of them actually. Everything from, I think, off-planetary surveillance gear, which is probably the National Reconnaissance Office, and their satellite systems for surveillance, like the keyhole satellites. These are all things, for the most part, we actually know about these things. They're on Wikipedia. But I want to talk a little bit more about the internet side of things because I think that's really fascinating. So part of what we are releasing today with Der Spiegel, or what has actually been released, just to be clear on the timeline, I'm not disclosing it first. I'm working as an independent journalist, summarizing the work that we have already released onto the internet as part of a publication house that went through a very large editorial process in which we redacted all the names of agents and information about those names, including their phone numbers and email addresses. And I should say that I actually think that the laws here are wrong because they are in favor of an oppressor who is criminal. So when we redact the names of people who are engaged in criminal activity, including drone murder, we are actually not doing the right thing. But I believe that we should comply with the law in order to continue to publish. And I think that's very important. We also redacted the names of victims of NSA surveillance because we think that there's a balance. Unfortunately, there is a serious problem, which is that the US government asserts that you don't have standing to prove that you've been surveilled unless we release that kind of information. But we don't want to release that kind of information in case it could be a legitimate target, and I'm really uncomfortable with that term, but let's say that there is a legitimate target, the most legitimate target, and we didn't want to make that decision. But we did also want to make sure that we didn't harm someone, but we also wanted to show concrete examples. So if you look at the Spiegel stuff online, we redacted the names even of those who were victimized by the NSA's oppressive tactics, which I think actually goes further than is necessary, but I believe that it strikes the right balance to ensure continued publication and also to make sure that people are not harmed and that legitimate good things, however rare they may be, they are also not harmed. So if you've been targeted by the NSA and you would have found out today if we had taken a different decision, I'm really sorry. But this is the thing I think that keeps us alive. So this is the choice that I think is the right choice, and I think it's also the safest choice for everyone. So that said, basically the NSA has a giant dragnet surveillance system that they call Turmoil. Turmoil is a passive interception system. The passive interception system essentially spans the whole planet. Who here has heard about the Merkel phone incident? Some of you heard about Chancellor Merkel. So we revealed that in Der Spiegel, and what we found was that they tasked her for surveillance. I'll talk a little bit about that later. But basically the way that this works is that they have this huge passive set of sensors, and any data that flows past it, they actually look at it. So there was a time in the past where surveillance meant looking at anything at all. And now the NSA tries to basically twist the words of every person who speaks whatever language they're speaking in. And they try to say that it's only surveillance if, after they collect it and record it to a database and analyze it with machines, only if I think an NSA agent basically looks at it personally and then clicks, I have looked at this, do they call it surveillance. Fundamentally, I really object to that because if I ran a turmoil collection system, that is passive signals intelligence systems collecting data from the whole planet, everywhere they possibly can, I would go to prison for the rest of my life. That's the balance, right? Jefferson talks about this. He says, that which the government is allowed to do, but you are not, this is a tyranny. There are some exceptions to that, but the CFAA in the United States, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, it's so draconian for regular people, and the NSA gets to do something like intercepting 7 billion people all day long with no problems. And the rest of us are not even allowed to experiment for improving the security of our own lives without being put in prison or under threat of serious indictment. And that, I think, is a really important point. So the turmoil system is a surveillance system, and it is a dragnet surveillance system that is a general warrant dragnet surveillance if there ever was one. And now we shot the British over this when we started our revolution. We called them general writs of assistance. These were generalized warrants which we considered to be a tyranny. And turmoil is the digital version of a general writ of assistance system. And the general writ of assistance itself is not clear if it even exists, because it's not clear to me that a judge would understand anything that I just said. Okay, so now we're going to get scary. So that's just the passive stuff. There exists another system, it's called Turbine, and we revealed about this system in the Spiegel publications today as well. So if turmoil is deep packet inspection, then Turbine is deep packet injection. And it is the system that, combined together with a thing, with Turmoil and Turbine, you can create a platform which they have consolidated, which they call Qfire. Qfire is essentially a way to programmatically look at things that flow across the internet that they see with Turmoil, and then using Turbine, they're able to actually inject packets to try to do attacks. And I'll describe some of those attacks in detail in a moment. But essentially, the interesting thing about Qfire also is that they have a thing that's called a diode. So if you have, for example, a large number of systems where you control them, you might say, hey, what are you doing on that backbone? Hey, what's going on with these systems? And they could say, well, we paid for access, we're doing this, it's all legal, etc. Qfire has this really neat little detail, which is that they compromise other people's routers and then redirect through them so that they can beat the speed of light. And how they do that is that they have a passive sensor that's nearby a thing that they can inject from. And when they see that that thing sees a selector that is interesting to them or is doing a thing that they would like to tamper with in some way, then they take a packet, they encapsulate the packet, they send it to the diode, which might be your home router potentially, and then that home router decapsulates that packet and sends it out. And because that is very close to you, and let's say you're visiting Yahoo, then the Yahoo packet will not beat you. That is, or they will not beat the NSA or GCHQ. So it's a race condition. And so they basically are able to control this whole system and then localize attacks in that process. So that's a pretty scary stuff, actually. And while it is a digital thing, I think it's important to understand that this is what Jefferson talked about when he talked about tyranny. This is turnkey tyranny, and it's not that it's coming, it's actually here. It's just merely a question about whether or not they'll use it in a way that we think is a good way or not a good way. And one of the scariest parts about this is that for this system, or these sets of systems to exist, we have been kept vulnerable. So it is the case that if the Chinese, if the Russians, if people here wish to build this system, there's nothing that stops them. And in fact, the NSA has, in a literal sense, retarded the process by which we would secure the internet because it establishes a hegemony of power, their power in secret to do these things. And in fact, I've seen evidence that shows that there are so many compromises taking place between the different Five Eyes signals intelligence groups that they actually have lists that explain, if you see this backdoor on the system, contact a friendly agency. You've just re-compromised the machine of another person. So when we talk about this, we have to consider that this is designed for at-scale exploitation. And as far as I can tell, it's being used for at-scale exploitation, which is not really, in my mind, a targeted, particularized type of thing, but rather it's fishing operations, it's fishing expeditions, it's more like fishing crusades, if you will. And in some cases, looking at the evidence, that seems to be what it is, targeting Muslims, I might add, because that's what they're interested in doing. So that said, that's the internet, and we get all the way down to the bottom, and we get to the close access operations and off-net. Off-net and close access operations are pretty scary things, but basically this is what we would call a black bag job. That's where these guys, they break into your house, they put something in your computer, and they take other things out of your computer. Here's an example, first top secret document of the talk so far. This is a close access operations box. It is basically car metasploit for the NSA, which is an interesting thing, but basically they say the attack is undetectable, and it's sadly a laptop running free software. It is injecting packets, and they say that they can do this from as far away as 8 miles to inject packets. So presumably using this, they're able to exploit a kernel vulnerability of some kind, parsing the wireless frames. And yeah, I've heard that they actually put this hardware from sources inside of the NSA and inside of other intelligence agencies that they actually put this type of hardware on drones so that they fly them over areas that they're interested in, and they do mass exploitation of people. Now, we don't have a document that substantiates that part, but we do have this document that actually claims that they've done it from up to 8 miles away. So that's a really interesting thing because it tells us that they understand that common wireless cards, probably running Microsoft Windows, which is an American company, that they know about vulnerabilities and they keep them a secret to use them. This is part of a constant theme of sabotaging and undermining American companies and American ingenuity. As an American, well, generally not a nationalist, I find this disgusting, especially as someone who writes free software and would like my tax dollars to be spent on improving these things. And when they know about them, I don't want them to keep them a secret because all of us are vulnerable. It's a really scary thing.
And now, this Crime Stoppers special report.
Crime Stoppers USA announces the new Justice Network programming will be coming to the CSRA, featuring Most Wanted from all over America through the Crime Stoppers Crime Stopping Network. The reason why they're using only Crime Stopper member programs is because they know we use the best practices in running our programs. The Justice Network, a brand new broadcast television network, will feature crime, justice, mystery, entertainment programming, and this first-of-kind network will also highlight important safety initiatives by law enforcement and other local organizers. The Justice Network intends to have 3 major safety initiatives at launch, working with National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to bring missing children home, working with local law enforcement agencies to offer safety tips to viewers, spotlighting selected most wanted fugitives hourly in each of the Justice Network's television markets. The partnership between the Justice Network and Crime Stoppers will expand the reach and exposure of your getting bad guys off the street. A lot of times bad guys do terrible things here and then run to a town just right over the border or somewhere else where it's just nobody's really looking for them there. The Justice Network with the Crime Stoppers Most Wanted will get the most wanted that did you and our town and our people wrong and think that they can get away from the long arm of the law. This was sent in by John D. Lamb, chairman of CrimeStoppersUSA.com. If you'd like to be a Crime Stopper, just go to our Facebook page, AugustaCrimeStoppers.org. Like us and follow us. There's no charge, no obligation. All you have to do is share the Most Wanted with all your friends. That's it. Just share everything we put on there. If that person's bad enough to where the cops are looking for them, let's get together and get them off the street. So go to our Facebook page and like us and follow us. And not only will you get the bad guys off the street, you'll get paid.
Augusta Crime Stoppers is brought to you by WBEK Channel 16 and Augusta Crime Stoppers. You too could be a Crime Stopper. If you have any information on any crime, call our tip line at 1-800-222-TIPS. Augusta Crime Stoppers is a production of Michael's Media. Augusta Crime Stoppers, where you stay anonymous. The criminals don't.